I'll start this video over data analysis with a quick review of Monday's class exercise from November the 25th. And what we had there was a data set that shows a list of majors by student. These unique IDs represent students. And if a student is only a finance major, then they might look like this. If they're a finance and accounting major, double major, they might look like this. And if they've added a third major of economics, they might look like this. The order of major 2 or 1 or 3 has no significance that I'm aware of, so we'll treat it as if it has no significance here. So whether it's in this order or this order, it's exactly the same. If we find a need, we can rearrange these orders, although it's certainly not a best practice to get into rearranging data if we can avoid it. So the first question we want to ask is, how many students have 3 majors? And the first way we'll approach this is to create a column to count the number of majors, and then we'll auto filter by that count. We'll name that column count of major, and intuitively we might like to use a count function. What we find out is that the count function does not find words, so we'll use the count a function. If you look at help, it will explain that that one finds words. If I can Control C to copy, and I want to copy this down. Let's see how many students we have, about 900 I believe. We want to get down here, but just in case we had 9,000 or 90,000 students, let's find a couple of quick ways to do that. So if I copy from here, I could do a Control Shift End, and it takes me to the very bottom right of the spreadsheet, which in this case happens to be the cell I want to go to. If I had had some other data down here or out here, then it might take me further down or to the right. But I can go that way and do a paste, or I could say copy, come over here to a column that I know goes all the way down, go back up to where I want to be, and then Control Shift up, and then paste there. Either works well to copy that formula. What we don't want to do is be scrolling the mouse wheel or having to mess with this scroll bar in a situation like that, because we could have a very long list of data. So now we know how many majors the student on each row has. We'd like to auto filter this data. Chances are we could come into data and add a filter, or I think the shortcut for that is Alt A and T, and we get our drop downs here. We were fortunate because the drop downs ended up in the right place. I'm going to Alt A T to turn that off. To be a lot safer, we should do a Control Shift down and over and make sure that exactly the area of data that we want filtered is filtered before hitting Alt A T. And then we can simply filter by the number of majors. I believe that answers the question, how many students have 3 majors? So when we filter, notice very importantly that this is filtered, and so the row numbers turn blue. And if they were not filtered, the row numbers would go back to black. So if I filter this for 3, tells me that 52 of 893 records were found, so we know that we have 52 majors with 52 students with 3 majors. Let's also try that with a COUNTIF function. I'm going to come over here, unfilter this, and say equals COUNTIF. The range that we want to count is this range, and the criteria that we want to give it is equals, or I don't even need equal in this case, I could just say 3, and we get the 52. I believe since it's a number, we don't need the double quotes. Let's test that. That works. But we could also say is greater than 2, in which case we would definitely need the quotes, because greater than 2 without the quotes doesn't mean very much to Excel, so it gives us an error. And greater than 2 is not a very good way to look at that, because we'd also be counting people who might have 4 majors if we had an extra column. So I'm going to undo and get back to count if 3 were equal to 3. If I wanted to count the number of accounting majors, at least listed in column 2 for now, there are 70. I suppose I could have expanded that to check all 3 columns at the same time and find all 112. Now here we have to be in quotes, because if we take accounting out of quotes, then Excel does not think of it as a word. It thinks of it as some kind of a named range or variable or something like that, which is not helpful. So I will undo and put that back in double quotes. So we've done this by auto filtering and using a count if. Now we're going to pivot the data. So we'll select the entire range again, Alt DP. We could do this a number of ways. We've already created a count of major column. So we could put that in and then count the unique IDs in each one. So we have, right now we're adding them up. We don't want to add them up. We want to count the unique IDs. We have 52 students with 3 majors, 337 with 2, and 504 with only 1. If we hadn't counted them up, it seems kind of pointless to pivot it after we've counted it. What's another way we could do that? Well, we know everyone has 1 major. They wouldn't be on this list. We could look at major 2 and major 3. Come over here, and then we could reason out that if there are 893 students total, and 841 of them have a blank second major, because, or I'm sorry, third major, we put major 3 across the column tops, and there were no blanks in major 2. I'm sorry, there were blanks in major 2, but they also had blanks in major 3. So if we take these 841 who have a blank in at least major 3 and over half of them in major 2 as well, then we have 841 who don't have 3 majors. We have 893 total, and we know that 893 minus 841 is 52. So that would be our third way to answer this question. The next question is, how many students have exactly 2 majors? And we basically did that. We could have done that over here with a count of major equal to 2 and seen 337. We could have done that on the pivot table. If we have 893 total, and we know that quite a number of them have a blank third major, and 504 of them also have a blank second major. What that's really telling us is that people with 1 major are 504, people with 3 majors, we already know are 52 because we did that before. The total should be 893, so we can back into that as 893 minus 52 minus 504 is the 337 that we saw before. How many students have exactly 1 major? We know from the count of major in the pivot table, I'm sorry, in the autofilter, that the answer is 504. And we know from the pivot table, students who have exactly 1 major, meaning that they're blank here and blank here, are 504. Gets us to the same number. Now let's check to see if any of our students have listed a major more than once. We'll use 3 new keywords for this, functions. One is text, because if they have 2 blank cells, that would look like they're equal to each other. So we want to make sure that we're dealing with cells that contain some text. And then the other, we'll use the or and the and a little bit creatively here. So this will be a good introduction to 3 new keywords. So let's go to our data and consider if major 1 is equal to major 2 for any of these students. First, let me unfilter. And I'm going to get rid of these cells and just put a label up here that says major 1 equals major 2. And so if I said major 1 equals major 2, notice I'm not saying if or anything like that. I'm just proposing that B2 equals BC2. And if it doesn't, Excel will tell me that's false. If it did, for example, if I did major 2 equals major 3, copy that over, it would say, oh yeah, that's true. However, they're blank, so that's a problem. So let's think about what the isText function does. IsText checks to see if B2 is text, and if I copy that to C2 and D2, it says, well, column B is, but C and D are not. So how could I use that to my advantage? I could come back to this one, and I could say, if I really need 2 things to be true, I won't use the if. I'll say, and C2 is equal to D2, which we already know it is. But also let me check to make sure that at least one of them is text. Now it says, no, one of those 2 things were not true. So this gets a little bit hard to look at in the cell builder here, the formula builder. Sometimes it's nice to click on this or hit Shift F3. And let's look at how this argument's working. We're using the AND keyword to see if 2 things are both true. You can imagine if that were an OR keyword, we would only need one of a list of things to be true. But with AND, we need all of them to be true in order for our answer to be true. And the 2 things we're checking here again are, is C2 equal to D2? Yes, it is, but they're blank. And then the second one is C2 text. No, it's not. So since at least one of these is false, then AND will return false for us. If, let's just say, we had 2 majors in there that were exactly the same, then this one would be happy. I'll hit Shift F3 and show that both C2 is equal to D2 and C2 is actually text this time. So I'm not a major, so I'll delete those, but illustrate how that works. So really we should come back and we should do the isText on this as well. I think it's probably going to work if I just copy that and paste it. Yeah, we're looking at the right 2 cells now, and if we hit Shift F3, then we're checking to see that B2 and C2 are equal and that B2 is text. So really we probably would want to come over and do the same thing. I'll widen these columns here in a moment. Let's say major 1 equals major 3. So do an Alt-Hoy on that. Let's copy that, but this time let's come in here and move some cells around. Then let's hit Shift F3 and see if I got them right. So we're checking for both ands, checking that B2 is equal to D2 now, and that the logical is text on B2. So if they're equal and B2 is text, then we'll both get true. We'll get true from the end. If either is not true, we'll get false from the end. Okay, so in this case, none of these 3 majors are both text and equal to each other. 3 combinations we had to check. What we could say is, or if any of those things are true, then give us true. For lack of a better column name, I'm going to put anything true. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this just like we did in class with the nested formula. And that will be equals or And I'm going to copy paste the formula from the first and the second and the third into this OR function, which is essentially what we're doing right here. We're just doing it all in one cell right there. So let me turn off our filter and then turn it back on to capture all of these columns. And let's find where we have any duplicate majors. We don't have any because I forgot to copy the formula down. Let's copy the formula down to the bottom using Control-Shift-N. And we found 6 students who listed finance twice, finance twice, finance twice, finance twice. And 1 student listed astrophysics twice. And so look how our different major checks. So here, major 1 and major 2 were the same. Here it was major 1 and major 3, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 1 and 3, and 1 and 2. And so anytime we got a true on one of these lines, the OR picked it up. And then of course when we rewrote all 4 of these columns into one big long ugly formula, then it got picked up as well as true. Just to double check that, let's make sure there weren't any trues in this column that weren't also true in J. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So exactly the same set of data. In class, I think some people were concerned about how to nest that. I absolutely don't mind if you build this out with multiple columns, just like that. Now let's return to our list of questions. And the last 2 questions are somewhat closely related. One is to list all the additional majors in descending order of popularity. And another is to create a list of students by unique ID who are pursuing a certain degree, in this case accounting. And anytime we're asked to get a unique list, and a certain list of students or a certain list of majors, then 99 times out of 100 we're safe to say we're going to want to use a pivot table to do that, because a data table is by far the quickest way to go through some data and find a unique list. So let's do that. First, let's find all the additional majors in descending order of popularity. Now we could, I told you earlier that it's not a best practice to be rearranging this data, but in this case we kind of need to answer a different question than we've answered before. We need to talk about all these majors as if they went together. And so if we were working with SQL or Access, we could write append queries to do this. What we're going to do in Excel is we're just going to make one compiled list of majors. And in this video, I'm going to make a new sheet to do this. So I'm going to bring the student ID with it, copy, and come over here and paste. And I'm just going to call this major. So if student 2 shows up further down this list with a different major, we don't mind. We're just going to copy them all. So this time I'm going to get major 2. Now I really don't want major 1 on that list. Just want to come down here and paste. And in fact, I didn't want this row other than to see that major 1 came in instead of major 2. So what I'm going to do is hit Control minus. I think in class we may have filtered out the blanks on this before doing this, but we'll just sort them out this time. So I'm going to come from here, do a Control minus, which would be the same thing as right click and delete, and tell it that I want to go ahead and remove those cells and shift these cells to the left. So shift all these cells to the left. And what that does is it puts our major 2 in the column with our major 1. So to get rid of the blanks here, I'm going to Control Shift down, Shift over, and then I want to sort, which for the legacy shortcut is Alt DS, but I think here we can get to a custom sort on this home menu. So let's see what that shortcut would be. It would be Alt H S and then U for custom sort. What we want to do is sort by column B. And that gives us a list of majors. If I control down on that, these are all the students who didn't have a second major, so I'll Control Shift down and I'll Control minus. And I can shift to the left or I could shift up. I don't have any data to the left or to the right or below, so I don't care, so I'll just shift to the left. So I'll shift up, it's a little more intuitive to what we're doing here. Now I'll come back to the data, and this time we'll capture the third column. So copy, paste it here, and again we really didn't need that top row, so and what I'm doing here is the same thing. I'm Control minus to delete that row, or right click and delete. If I have the whole row deleted, it knows that it can only delete. So this time we're going to select all 3 columns, Control Shift down. We're going to do an Alt DS, but it's really Alt H S U. Hopefully you'll memorize that, and that's how you'll sort things. I still use the legacy shortcut. So let's sort by column D in this case. And we will come in. First thing we'll do is delete these 2 columns. I did a Control Shift down, Control minus, delete to the left. And we already sorted by column D, so I can Control down and delete these. If you're following along at home, Control minus, Shift up. Make sure you have 1,335 rows if you have these 2 column headers. And now we have a list of 900 people pursuing about 13 and 40 majors. So if we pivot this list with an Alt N V, this time, just so we don't have multiple pivot tables on multiple sheets, I'm going to just place the pivot table over here. And I want to put it on an existing worksheet. Don't put it right up against the top because sometimes they need a little room to grow. So allow about half a dozen rows and columns on either side, or excuse me, above and to the left. So a lot of talking and not much doing. Now we've got our pivot table looking at our complete list of majors. If we simply pull major into row, then we should get a unique list of majors. But if we want to know how many people are pursuing each major, we can pull this unique ID and count it. And the sum of that is our 1334. So that's how many unique majors we are pursuing. Everyone's a finance major, and then these show their second and third majors. So that answered question 5. Oh, we're not descending order of popularity yet. Let's get that. Right click on any one of those numbers and sort largest to smallest. Now we're in descending order. And 6, create a list of students by unique ID who are pursuing accounting. We could actually use this same list. We can just rearrange this table to say if the major is accounting. If we just want to filter that, let's pull it up into the filter area and say we only want the accounting major. We could select these 2 as well, but if we wanted to select multiple items. But let's not. Let's just go with basic accounting. And then let's pull our unique ID into the rows as well. And so now we have a list of each student who is pursuing accounting. We really don't need that count of unique ID on there. We can pull it off. And there's our unique list. And so this completes the video for Monday's exercise. Longer than I intended. I hope you watched it on double speed. In the next video, I will offer some practice exercises on a new data set.